When I walked into my house that afternoon, I thought the worst thing waiting for me would be another argument with my mom. Instead, I found my entire life, my clothes, my books, my childhood memories, thrown into the trash on the driveway. And standing above it all, my mom and my siblings were laughing while live streaming it to hundreds of people. My brother kicked one of my bags like it was a joke. My sister yelled, "The basement parasite is finally gone." I didn't say a word. But 6 months later, they were the ones begging me to come back. Stay with us. This amazing story will leave you speechless. Before we get started, hit like, share, and subscribe, and drop your location in the comments. When I pulled into the driveway that afternoon, something felt wrong before I even stepped out of the car. The house was strangely quiet, but the front yard looked like it had swallowed a storm. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. A pile of black trash. Bags sat in the middle of the concrete, bulging and slumped over like discarded bodies. Then I noticed the colors. Pieces of fabric, books, a familiar shoe sticking out from one torn bag. My stomach tightened. Those weren't just random trash bags. They were my things. My clothes, my memories, my entire life dumped outside like last week's garbage. For a second, I stood frozen beside my car, gripping my keys so tightly they dug into my palm. A cold numbness crept through me, the kind that whispers, "This can't be real." But reality doesn't wait for permission. It hits you whether you're ready or not. A gust of wind blew across the yard, lifting one of my shirts from the ground and dragging it toward the street. That was when I realized people were watching. Neighbors stood on their porches, whispering behind their hands, pretending they were just watering plants or checking mail. But their eyes were fixed on the mess, on me. I stepped closer, my breath catching when I saw my childhood photo album lying face up on the pavement, pages bent and stained. I reached for it, brushing dirt from the cover, and felt something inside me crack. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. Before I could gather another thought, I heard laughter, sharp, echoing, unmistakably familiar. I looked up and saw my family through the front window, clustered together with phones raised, the glow of a live stream haloing their faces. My mom was front and center, shouting something I couldn't hear yet, but the expression on her face told me everything. Fury, humiliation, performance. My heart thudded painfully in my chest as I realized the truth. They weren't just throwing me out. They were putting on a show while they did it. As I stepped closer to the house, the sound finally reached me. My mother's voice, amplified with that sharp, theatrical edge she always used when she knew people were watching. "Look at this," she shouted toward her phone, angling the camera toward the trash bags. 28 years old and still living in my basement like a parasite. Everyone say goodbye to freeloading." Her tone dripped with satisfaction, the kind she usually reserved for gossip or winning arguments. But today, it was aimed directly at me. My siblings crowded behind her, faces glowing with the excitement of manufactured drama. My sister held her phone high, angled perfectly to catch my reaction as I approached, while comments flashed rapidly across the screen. Little hearts and laughing emojis floated upward, feeding the spectacle. "Oh my God, she's actually here," my sister whispered into her mic, lowering her voice as if narrating a wildlife documentary. "Watch this, guys." I wanted to speak. I wanted to demand answers or at least salvage some dignity. But the words tangled in my throat as my mother swung the camera toward me like a spotlight. "There she is," she yelled. "The basement. Queen herself. Maybe now she can finally learn how the real world works." The viewers erupted in digital applause, and my siblings burst into real laughter, overlapping in a chorus of cruelty. My brother, leaning against the banister with a smirk plastered across his face, added, "Come on, give us one of your excuses for the stream. Tell them why you can't move out." His comment section cheered him on like he'd delivered a comedy punchline. He tilted his phone toward me, waiting for humiliation to bloom on my face. But I didn't give them anything. I stood perfectly still, keeping my expression blank, refusing to let them film the pain clawing inside me. Silence, I realized, was the only weapon I had left, and it infuriated them. My mother scoffed dramatically and turned back to her audience. "See," she said, "this is what I've dealt with. Nothing but attitude and entitlement." The live stream chat exploded again, but I didn't stay to watch. For the first time, it hit me. They didn't want a daughter. They wanted content. I had barely processed the sting of their live stream performance when my brother strutted out the front door like he was stepping onto a stage. He didn't even say my name, just walked straight to the pile of my belongings, lifted his foot, and kicked one of my suitcases so hard it tumbled across the driveway. "Finally," he shouted loud enough for his stream to hear. "The family loser is gone. Took her long enough to crawl out of the basement." His friends, watching through his phone, spammed laughing emojis until the whole screen looked like it was drowning in them. My sister flung open the window upstairs, leaning out with her phone aimed at me. "Guys, look, she's just standing there. I told you she'd act all dramatic." She giggled, twirling her hair, pretending this wasn't the same sister who once cried in my room over a breakup while I comforted her for hours. Now she stared at me like I was a stranger in the street. Then came my mom. She stepped onto the porch with a triumphantly folded pair of my jeans in her hand, waving them like a victory flag. "You're 28 years old," she screamed, making sure the live stream caught every syllable. "Living in my basement like a parasite. Get out now." The word parasite hit harder than anything she had thrown at me before. She hurled the jeans onto the ground, staring at me as if daring me to fight back. For a moment, the world blurred around me, the laughter, the phones, the comments flashing across screens. I felt something inside me twist, not from anger, but from a quiet, heavy sadness. I realized that no explanation, no defense, no plea would ever matter to them. They had already decided who I was, and they were broadcasting it to the world. So I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I didn't give them a single moment they could turn into content. Instead, I picked up my closest bag, walked to my car, and placed it gently in the back seat. Silence wrapped around me like armor as I closed the door. Without looking back, I turned the key, and I drove away. The moment my tires rolled off the driveway, a strange, hollow quiet filled the car. No shouting, no laughter, no cameras pointed at my face, just the hum of the engine and my own uneven breathing. I kept waiting for the anger to hit me, or the humiliation, or even the urge to turn back and demand answers. But none of that came. Instead, there was only numbness, cold, heavy, and settling into my chest like wet cement. I drove without knowing where I was going, only certain of one thing. I couldn't stay there another second. The sun dipped behind the trees as the road stretched endlessly ahead. At a red light, I glanced at myself in the rearview mirror. My eyes looked unfamiliar, wide, dazed, like someone watching their life burn from the outside. My childhood home, the place where I once baked cookies with my mom and told secrets to my siblings, now felt like a theater stage where I had been cast as the villain. I didn't recognize the roles anymore. I didn't recognize them. And maybe, I thought bitterly, they had never truly recognized me either. Hours passed before I finally pulled into an empty grocery store parking lot. The sky had gone completely dark, and the silence around me felt almost too big. I lowered the seat back and stared at the ceiling of the car, trying to untangle the knot inside my chest. I wanted to cry, but the tears refused to come. I wanted to scream, but my throat felt locked. All I could do was replay the moment my mom called me a parasite, her voice echoing louder than any live stream comment. Eventually, exhaustion seeped in. With nowhere else to go, I curled up under a thin jacket and closed my eyes. The car was cramped and cold, but for the first time in years, no one could tell me what to do, who to be, or how much of a disappointment I was. It wasn't comfort, but it was freedom. The first fragile piece of it I'd felt in a long time. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the car windows, sharp and unforgiving. My neck ached from sleeping in the cramped seat, but waking up wasn't the hard part. The hard part was remembering why I wasn't in a bed, why my belongings were shoved into the trunk, why the silence around me felt both terrifying and strangely peaceful. I sat there for a long moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, realizing that everything familiar had collapsed overnight. I had no home, no plan, no safety net, just a car full of memories and a world that suddenly felt too big. But somewhere beneath the ache, a tiny spark of determination flickered. If my family wanted me gone, then I would build a life so solid that no one could ever throw me out again. I started small, because small was all I had. I found a rented room above a mechanic's garage, the kind with peeling wallpaper and a single window that rattled when trucks rolled past. It wasn't much, but it had a lock, and after everything, that felt like luxury. I spent my first night there unpacking the bare essentials, folding clothes onto a wobbly thrift store shelf, and taping old photos to the wall like anchors. During the day, I worked whatever jobs I could find. A morning shift at a cafe wiping down tables, an evening gig entering receipts for a small business owner who barely remembered my name. The pay was low, and the hours were long. But slowly, things began to settle into rhythm. I wasn't thriving yet, not even close, but I was standing. And after the humiliation of being thrown out like trash, standing felt like victory. Sometimes, when I walked home after work, exhaustion threatening to drag me down, I'd catch myself smiling. Not because life was easy, but because every inch of progress belonged to me. No live stream audience was watching. No voices were tearing me down. The silence that once felt crushing now felt like space. Space to grow, space to breathe, space to finally become someone I recognized. I wasn't rebuilding my life. I was building it for the first time. 3 weeks into my new routine, the exhaustion began settling into my bones. I was juggling 2 jobs, barely covering rent, and living off instant noodles and free cafe leftovers. But even with the fatigue, I refused to break. Every morning I reminded myself, you're not living for them anymore. And somehow, that was enough to keep my feet moving. One afternoon at the cafe, during a lull between customers, I was wiping down tables when a woman in a charcoal blazer and neat bun walked in. She wasn't a regular. She carried herself with the kind of quiet authority that made everyone else stand a little straighter. She ordered a simple black coffee, then sat near the window with a laptop that looked far too expensive for our humble shop. I didn't think much of it until she called out, "Excuse me, miss," and motioned me over. "You handled that rush really well," she said, looking up from her screen. "Most people would have panicked." I blinked, startled. Compliments weren't something I heard often, certainly not from strangers. "Thank you," I replied, awkwardly brushing a loose strand of hair behind my ear. She tilted her head slightly. "What's your background? You seem organized, detail-oriented." For a moment, I hesitated. My family's live stream humiliation flashed across my memory, and shame threatened to choke me. But I swallowed it down and answered honestly. I used to help manage administrative work, records, scheduling, data organization, nothing special. Her eyebrows rose. "That is special and valuable." She closed her laptop and slid a business card across the table. "My company is offering training placements, paid. We need people who can handle pressure and keep systems running. Something tells me you'd be good at it." I stared at the card, stunned. A real opportunity, one I hadn't begged for, one not born from guilt or manipulation. It felt like a lifeline thrown across a wide, dark river. "Think about it," she said, standing to leave. "Sometimes the right door opens when everything else is closed." As she walked out, I clutched the card tightly. For the first time since losing everything, hope felt real. The training program started 2 weeks after I received the card, and stepping into that office felt like stepping into another universe. Gone were the cramped cafe tables, the sticky apron, the endless fatigue. Here, everything smelled like new paper and ambition. I was surrounded by people who actually wanted to learn, who asked questions without mocking anyone, who didn't need an audience to validate their worth. For the first time in years, I felt like I was allowed to exist without being compared, criticized, or humiliated. The work was challenging. Complex databases, detailed compliance protocols, systems that required precision and patience. But I absorbed everything hungrily, as if my brain had been starved for too long. I stayed late after class, practicing, taking notes, asking for feedback. Slowly, the instructors started nodding when they saw me, telling me I had potential. That word, potential, felt like sunlight on a place inside me I didn't know was still alive. Weeks fell into months. My rented room above the garage no longer felt like a temporary hideout, but a stepping stone. I bought a small desk, a real lamp, and even a plant I named Second Chance. Because I figured if it survived my inconsistent watering skills, then maybe I could survive everything too. Bit by bit, my life took shape, not because someone else shaped it for me, but because I built it with my own two hands. During those months, my phone stayed quiet. My mom didn't call, my siblings didn't text, no apologies, no updates, no attempts to check if I was alive. At first, the silence felt like rejection all over again, but as time passed, the silence transformed into something else: clarity, peace, proof that I didn't need them to breathe, to grow, to exist. While I was evolving, they remained exactly where I'd left them. By the 6th month, I had completed the program, earned certifications I never thought I'd have, and accepted a stable, well-paying job offer. I even signed a lease for a small apartment with actual windows and a kitchen big enough to turn around in. For the first time, my life didn't feel like an accident. It felt like a beginning. 6 months after I started my new job, life had finally settled into something that felt stable. My mornings were calm, my routines predictable in the best way, and for once, the only drama in my life came from spilled coffee or printer jams. On a quiet Thursday, I woke earlier than usual, sunlight drifting through my new apartment's curtains. I stretched, yawned, and reached for my phone, expecting the usual handful of emails, work reminders, promotional spam, maybe a message from my mentor. Instead, my screen lit up with something I hadn't seen in half a year: 72 unread messages, all from the same people: my mother, my brother, my sister. For a moment, I genuinely thought it was a glitch. I blinked, scrolled, blinked again. The timestamps told a story all on their own: messages sent at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4:17 a.m., desperate little digital footprints in the dark. My notifications bar looked like a warning siren. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the first message. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with something like an old bruise being pressed. Finally, curiosity won. The most recent email was from my mom, the subject line trembling with urgency. "We need to talk, it's important." The message itself was short, almost frantic. "Please answer. It's serious. Things are happening that you don't understand. Call me back." I scrolled down. The one before that was from my sister. "Can you please pick up? Something's wrong with the channel, with Mom. Just call me." Then my brother, usually the loudest, now sounding strangely small. "I messed up, okay? We all messed up. Just tell us where you are." Each message felt like a pebble dropped into still water, ripples of panic spreading across the quiet life I'd built. My heart beat faster, not out of empathy, but out of disbelief. After months of silence, months of pretending I didn't exist, my family had suddenly remembered me. I set the phone down slowly, letting the weight of their messages settle into the room. Something had changed, dramatically. But I wasn't sure yet whether it was my problem. I didn't reply to the messages right away. Instead, I sat on the edge of my bed, letting my phone buzz uselessly in my hand as more notifications trickled in. Curiosity finally pushed me to open social media, and the moment the page loaded, everything clicked into place. Their once busy live stream channel, where they spent years mocking people for entertainment, where they humiliated me for views, was now a battlefield of accusations, screenshots, and angry comments. It started with one clip. Someone had reposted the live stream from the day they threw out my belongings. I recognized the driveway instantly, the pile of trash bags, my mother's triumphant smirk, frozen mid-sentence. The video had gone viral, not as comedy, but as cruelty. Thousands of people were condemning them, calling their behavior abusive, toxic, humiliating. Viewers who once praised them now turned on them with sharpened words. Sponsors pulled out one by one. Brand deals vanished overnight. Their follower count free fell like a broken elevator. Someone had even stitched the original video with a caption that read, "Imagine doing this to your own child for clout." And that wasn't even the worst part. Another clip surfaced, one from a live stream just weeks after I left. In it, my family joked about how peaceful the house felt without me, mocking the way I used to work late hours or stay quiet during dinner. The internet didn't laugh. They shredded them. Viewers demanded accountability. Some called for platforms to suspend their channels entirely. Others dug up old streams, pointing out years of subtle bullying, moments I remembered all too well. Their comment sections became graveyards of lost supporters. No matter how many half-apologies or defensive statements they posted, it only made things worse. People weren't buying the act anymore. By noon, a community tab update from my sister appeared. "We're dealing with some personal issues. Please respect our privacy." The irony nearly made me laugh. Privacy was never something they cared about until the spotlight finally turned on them. They weren't reaching out of love. They were reaching out because the world had finally seen them clearly, and their empire was crumbling. As I kept scrolling through the chaos online, a strange calmness settled over me. For the first time, I wasn't the one panicking. The roles had reversed. My family, once so confident, so loud, so eager to broadcast every humiliating moment, was now desperately trying to hide their own. But their messages weren't coming from guilt or newfound empathy. No, their desperation had a very specific shape, and it became clearer with every email I opened. One from my mother read, "We're having issues with the mortgage. They're saying there's a problem with verification. Call me." Another came from my sister. "Mom can't fix the channel. She needs you. Please answer." At first, the messages felt vague, incomplete. But then I opened an email my brother sent at 4:03 a.m. The subject line simply said, "It's all falling apart." His message was longer, rushed. "Sponsors dropped us. You know how everything works. Bank stuff, contracts, paperwork. Mom messed up the renewal forms and froze the account. They're reviewing our tax records too. Just help us fix it. You're the only one who ever understood this stuff." There it was, the truth behind the sudden flood of attention. My family didn't miss me. They missed how useful I had been. They were drowning, and they wanted the person they once mocked for being too quiet and too responsible to pull them back to shore. The same daughter they threw out on a live stream was now their emergency life raft. Details kept unraveling. Through online rumors and half-panicked texts, I learned their channel income had been frozen due to contractual violations. My mother had missed critical financial documents, things I used to manage quietly in the background. Without my organization, their carefully curated online life started to collapse like a house built on rotting wood. And now they were terrified of losing the house, of losing their income, of losing the image they'd spent years performing for strangers. Suddenly, I wasn't the parasite anymore. I was the missing piece they couldn't function without. But that didn't mean I owed them anything. I set my phone on the counter and tried to convince myself to ignore it all. I had spent 6 months building a life that didn't revolve around their chaos, and yet here they were, clawing their way back into my peace. Minutes passed before the phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't another email. It was a voice note from my mother. For a long moment, I just stared at it. Then, with a slow exhale, I pressed play. Her voice cracked before she even said my name. I don't know where to start," she began, sounding nothing like the woman who once screamed at me on a live stream. "Everything is falling apart. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought pushing you out would motivate you." She sniffed, hard, a sound wet with panic. "But now the accounts are frozen and the house is in review and your brother is being investigated because of something he said online and—" Her breath hitched. "I need you. We all need you." I closed my eyes as her voice trembled through the speaker. Not once did she say she was sorry. Not once did she acknowledge the humiliation, the cruelty, the betrayal. Next came a message from my sister, long, rambling, almost childlike. I shouldn't have joined the live stream. I just didn't think it was serious, okay? I didn't know it would blow up. People are bullying me now. They're calling me heartless. They're saying awful things. Please just talk to Mom. She's not okay. Then my brother, the one who kicked my suitcase across the driveway, sent a short, blunt text. "I messed up. I know I messed up. Tell me how to fix this." Their messages piled up like debris from a collapsing building. Each one reached out with shaking hands, not for forgiveness, but for rescue. And part of me, the part they tried so hard to crush, wanted to slam every door in their faces. But another part of me, the part that still remembered birthdays and late-night talks and childhood laughter, hesitated. They wanted my help, but they didn't deserve my silence or my surrender. I wasn't the same girl they threw away, and I had to decide what that meant next. I didn't answer my family right away. Instead, I slipped on my shoes, grabbed my keys, and stepped outside into the crisp morning air. The city hummed softly, cars passing, distant voices drifting between buildings, the quiet rhythm of a world that had never cared about my shame or my family's live streams. Out here, I wasn't the basement parasite. I wasn't the punchline to someone's joke. I was just myself. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough. I walked to my favorite cafe, ordered a latte I could finally afford without checking my bank balance, and sat by the window. My phone buzzed every few minutes, but I didn't touch it. Instead, I opened my work tablet and reviewed a project I'd been leading, a real important project. My supervisor trusted me. My team respected me. I even had interns now, people who asked me questions because they believed I had answers worth hearing. My apartment, though small, felt like luxury compared to the garage room. I had a kitchen where I could cook real meals, a bedroom with sunlight streaming through clean curtains, even a bookshelf lined with novels I finally had time to read. Plants thrived on my windowsill, living proof that I could take care of something even when no one had taken care of me. I thought about the girl who once tiptoed around her own home, constantly bracing for criticism. The girl who was quiet not because she wanted to be, but because speaking only invited more cruelty. The girl who put in endless emotional labor but was told she contributed nothing. That girl had disappeared somewhere between the spreadsheets, the late-night study sessions, and the small victories I had collected like precious stones. The woman sitting here now, sipping warm coffee, reviewing documents, planning her future, was someone my family never believed I could be, someone they didn't help create, someone who existed in spite of them. The messages from my mother, my siblings, my past, they all wanted something from me. But for once, I asked myself the only question that mattered. What do I want? And the answer wasn't simple. But I knew it wouldn't come from going backwards. 2 days passed before I finally agreed to meet them. Not because their messages convinced me, and not because I felt obligated, but because closure had been haunting me like a shadow. I needed to see them with my own eyes, to understand whether this desperation was real or just another performance. So I chose a neutral place, a quiet cafe on the edge of town, one with dim lighting and a calm atmosphere that wouldn't let anyone turn the moment into a spectacle. I arrived early and sat near the back, where the wooden walls muffled outside noise. My hands trembled slightly around my cup. I wasn't afraid of them. I was afraid of the version of myself they used to reduce me to. The girl who apologized before she spoke. The girl who shrank to make others comfortable. I promised myself I wouldn't let her return today. They walked in 10 minutes later. My sister spotted me first, her face pale and tight. My brother followed, shoulders hunched, eyes avoiding mine. Then came my mother. She looked older, not just tired, but worn down, like life had finally removed the filters she once hid behind. For a moment, none of them spoke. They just stood there, taking in the woman I had become. I gestured to the seats across from me, and slowly they sat, the weight of unspoken history settling between us. My mother was the first to break. "You look different," she said softly, her voice stripped of its usual sharpness. "I am different," I replied. My sister cleared her throat. "We're sorry," she whispered, "about the live stream, about everything." Her eyes glistened, but I couldn't tell if the tears were for me or for what they had lost. My brother leaned forward, elbows on the table. "We messed up. Badly. We know that." His voice cracked slightly. "We didn't think things would fall apart. We didn't think you leaving would change everything." I listened, really listened, but I stayed silent until they finished. There was remorse in their words, yes, but also fear. Fear of consequences, fear of losing comfort, fear of the chaos they created. Finally, I spoke. "I'm here to talk," I said calmly, "but I'm not here to fix your mistakes." Their faces fell. This time, they would have to face the truth. For a long moment after my words settled between us, none of them spoke. My mother's eyes flicked downward, her fingers twisting the edge of a napkin until it nearly tore. My sister looked like she wanted to argue, to insist that I was being dramatic or unkind, but even she seemed too drained to perform. My brother leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling as if the right apology might drop down and save him, but nothing did. They had to face me without an audience, without likes, without the safety of a camera lens. My mother finally cleared her throat. "We didn't realize how much you were handling," she murmured. "All the paperwork, the documents, the adult things. We thought you were just hiding in your room." She hesitated. "Maybe I didn't want to see how much you were really doing." I took a deep breath. It would have been easy to lash out, to list every forgotten moment of cruelty, every ignored effort, every time they dismissed me as lazy or useless. But I wasn't here to hurt them. I was here to protect myself. "I'm not your safety net," I said quietly. "I'm not the one who fixes your mess when things fall apart. I'm not the villain you painted online, and I'm not the silent worker you only appreciate when everything collapses." My sister leaned forward, her voice small. "So, what happens now?" I looked at each of them. The mother who weaponized embarrassment, the sister who chased attention, the brother who laughed at my pain. And then I thought about my apartment with its sunlight and safety, my job where people valued me, the peace I'd earned with every step away from them. "What happens now," I said evenly, "is boundaries." Their expressions tightened, confusion flickering. "I'm not cutting you off," I continued, "but I'm not coming back. I'm not moving in. I'm not managing your finances, and I'm not saving the channel. If you want help, you'll need professionals, not me." My mother swallowed hard. "So, we're really on our own?" "You always were," I said gently. "You just didn't realize it until I left." And with that, the power shifted. Quietly, irrevocably. For the first time, my future belonged to me. When I stepped out of the cafe, the air felt lighter, cooler, cleaner, as if the universe had been holding its breath during that entire conversation and finally exhaled with me. My family remained inside, 3 silhouettes slumped around a table where they had once expected me to fix their world. But I didn't feel triumphant walking away. I didn't feel angry. What I felt was something far quieter, far more powerful. I felt free. For the first time, their voices weren't echoing in my mind. Their judgments weren't clawing at my confidence. Their chaos wasn't pulling me under. The chains I'd carried for years, made of guilt, fear, obligation, and hope, finally loosened, falling away one link at a time. I didn't realize how heavy they were until I was no longer dragging them behind me. On the drive home, I rolled the windows down and let the wind tangle my hair, laughing softly at how unfamiliar happiness felt on my tongue. Not the fragile kind I used to cling to, the kind dependent on someone else's approval, but a steady, grounded happiness born from knowing I'd survived something most people never see coming, the kind of betrayal that doesn't break your bones but tries to break your identity. My apartment welcomed me with quiet warmth. The sunlight on the floor, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the little plant named Second Chance thriving in its corner. All of it felt like proof that a new life didn't have to be loud to be meaningful. It could be stable, peaceful, mine. That night, as I sat at my desk reviewing work emails, a notification popped up on my phone. Channel terminated due to multiple policy violations. My family's final act, their last mask, had crumbled completely. I stared at the screen for a moment, then set it face down, not with satisfaction, not with spite, but with closure. They had built an empire on humiliation. I had built a life on resilience. And that life, quiet, steady, earned, was the greatest revenge I could have asked for. I leaned back in my chair, took a slow, steady breath, and smiled. This chapter was finally over. The next one would be written entirely by me.